Picture this: a world fraught with chaos and despair, where the cries of an oppressed nation rise like incense to the heavens. The land is Israel, the time is the turbulent era of the judges, and the people are desperate for deliverance. Amid this darkness emerges a singular, radiant figure, a woman of unparalleled wisdom, faith, and courage. Her name is Deborah, the only female judge of Israel, whose story is etched into history as a beacon of God's sovereignty and the transformative power of faith. The narrative begins in the shadow of Joshua's death, as Israel entered a period of disarray and spiritual decline. With no central leadership to unify the tribes, the nation spiraled into what the Bible describes in Judges 21:25. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. This moral and social anarchy was not random. It reflected a deeper issue: Israel's covenant relationship with God. Time and again, the Israelites abandoned their faith, turning to the idols of neighboring nations. The consequence: they were subjected to the oppression of their enemies, fulfilling God's covenant warnings. Yet God's mercy was unwavering. Whenever they cried out for deliverance, He raised up judges to save them. This cycle of apostasy, oppression, repentance, and deliverance is poignantly captured in Judges 2:14 through 16. In His anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of raiders who plundered them. Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders. This cycle of suffering and redemption forms the backdrop against which Deborah's remarkable story unfolds. Israel's plight under King Jabin of Canaan was one of its darkest chapters. From his stronghold in Hazor, Jabin ruled with an iron fist, his military might enforced by his ruthless general, Sisera. The biblical text in Judges 4:1-3 paints a grim picture. The Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan. Sisera, the commander of his army, had 900 chariots fitted with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. Sisera's iron chariots were the epitome of military superiority, akin to the tanks of ancient warfare. For 20 years, these formidable war machines crushed any hope of resistance. The Israelites lived in fear, subjected to economic exploitation, social oppression, and perhaps even forced labor. The weight of their suffering drove them to cry out to God, a plea that did not go unheard. Enter Deborah, a woman whose very existence challenged the norms of her time. In a patriarchal society where leadership was overwhelmingly male, Deborah stood out as both a judge and a prophetess. Her introduction in Judges 4:4-5 is succinct yet profound. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. Deborah's dual roles were extraordinary. As a prophetess, she served as a conduit for God's messages, guiding the people spiritually. As a judge, she exercised legal and administrative authority, resolving disputes and providing leadership during one of Israel's darkest hours. Her court under the palm of Deborah became a symbol of divine wisdom and justice. Deborah's leadership was not limited to spiritual and judicial matters. She was also a warrior leader, chosen by God to orchestrate Israel's deliverance from Canaanite oppression. Deborah's faith and leadership shone brightest when she called Barak, a military commander, to lead Israel's forces against Sisera. In Judges 4:6-7, she delivers a divine directive. "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." Barak's response, however, reveals his hesitation. He agrees to go to battle only if Deborah accompanies him. This conditional faith prompts Deborah's iconic reply in Judges 4:9, "Certainly I will go with you. But because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." The battle that ensued was nothing short of miraculous. Barak and his army, vastly outnumbered and outmatched, faced Sisera's iron chariots on the plains near the Kishon River. Yet God intervened. A sudden storm turned the battlefield into a quagmire, rendering Sisera's chariots useless. The Israelites, emboldened by divine intervention, routed the Canaanite forces. Sisera fled on foot, seeking refuge in the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Jael's actions would fulfill Deborah's prophecy. Offering Sisera hospitality, she waited until he fell asleep, and then killed him by driving a tent peg through his head. A shocking yet decisive act that sealed Israel's victory. Before we continue with the video and the rest of the story about Deborah, I want to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and help me out. Okay, let's continue. Following the triumph, Deborah and Barak composed a song recorded in Judges 5, celebrating God's deliverance. This poetic masterpiece is one of the oldest texts in the Bible, blending vivid imagery with theological depth. It highlights not only God's intervention, but also the bravery of those who answered his call. Deborah is hailed as a mother in Israel, a title reflecting her nurturing yet authoritative role in leading the nation. Deborah's leadership was not confined to lofty halls or secluded sanctuaries. Picture her beneath the shade of a palm tree, a place known as the Palm of Deborah, positioned strategically between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. Here, people from across Israel came to seek her wisdom and guidance. In an era defined by chaos and oppression, Deborah's accessibility was as revolutionary as her leadership. She was not hidden away, separated from the cries of her people. Instead, she was present, listening, discerning, and providing solutions rooted in divine wisdom. Her role as judge was not merely a political appointment, it was a divine calling. Guided by God, Deborah offered resolutions that were just and wise, reflecting her integrity and deep spiritual connection. This scene reminds us of the essence of godly leadership: accessibility, humility, and a commitment to serving others. In a patriarchal society where women rarely held positions of authority, Deborah's rise as a judge and prophetess was extraordinary. Yet, her leadership was embraced and respected by all Israel, a testament to her character and God's anointing. Her authority stemmed not only from her position, but also from her moral strength and intimate relationship with God. She stood as a tangible reminder that God had not abandoned his people, even in their darkest hours. With Deborah's leadership firmly established, Israel found hope once more. Her rise marked a turning point, as the people who had endured 20 years of brutal oppression now had a leader who could guide them back to God and deliverance. The book of Judges vividly recounts the moment when Deborah, emboldened by divine instruction, initiated the process of liberation. In Judges 4:6-7, we read, "She sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, 'The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you. Go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands.'" This divine command was clear and bold. Deborah, a woman of both spiritual and practical insight, recognized Barak's potential as a military leader. His selection was no coincidence. Barak was from Kadesh in Naphtali, a region deeply affected by the Canaanite oppression. His personal stake in Israel's liberation made him a fitting choice, and his familiarity with the terrain would be a strategic advantage in the looming conflict. Deborah's instructions were precise. Barak was to gather 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun, assembling them on Mount Tabor, a natural stronghold with a commanding view of the Jezreel Valley. This choice of location was not arbitrary. Mount Tabor's elevation, standing at about 588 meters above sea level, provided a strategic vantage point that would be crucial in the upcoming battle. But Deborah's message went beyond military strategy. In Judges 4:7, she relayed God's promise. "I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands." This assurance was not just a guarantee of victory, it was a reminder that the battle belonged to the Lord. The plan to lure Sisera's forces to the Kishon River hinted at God's divine strategy, one that would turn nature itself into a weapon. Barak's response to Deborah reveals much about his character and the nature of faith. In Judges 4:8, Barak said, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." At first glance, his words might seem like a lack of faith in God's promise. However, a closer look shows a man who understood the significance of Deborah's spiritual leadership. Barak recognized that Deborah, as a prophetess, embodied God's presence and guidance. Her presence in the battle would inspire the troops and serve as a visible sign of God's favor. In a time when spiritual and military leadership were deeply intertwined, Deborah's role was indispensable. Deborah's response was both encouraging and prophetic. In Judges 4:9, she said, "Certainly I will go with you, but because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Her agreement to accompany Barak demonstrated her commitment to Israel's cause and her willingness to lead from the front. Yet her prophecy introduced an unexpected twist. The ultimate glory of the victory would belong to a woman, not Barak. This revelation was a bold challenge to cultural norms, setting the stage for an extraordinary conclusion to the battle. With Deborah's agreement, Barak began the monumental task of assembling an army. In Judges 4:10 we read, "There Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 men went up under his command. Deborah also went up with him." Gathering 10,000 men was no small feat. After 2 decades of oppression, many Israelites were demoralized, their spirit crushed under Canaanite dominance. Convincing them to rise up against a formidable enemy equipped with iron chariots required immense courage and faith, not only from Barak, but from every soldier who answered the call. Deborah's presence alongside Barak was a powerful symbol. She was not merely a figurehead, she was a leader who stood shoulder to shoulder with the people, embodying the unity of faith and action. Together, they prepared to face an enemy that had terrorized their nation for 20 years. This moment marked the beginning of a dramatic shift in Israel's history, as God's promise of deliverance began to unfold through the faith and courage of his chosen leaders. The confrontation between the Israelites, led by Deborah and Barak, and the powerful Canaanite army under Sisera's command, was set to unfold in dramatic fashion. The book of Judges provides a detailed account of this pivotal event. In Judges 4:12-13 we read, "When they told Sisera that Barak son of Abinoam had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River all his men and his 900 chariots fitted with iron." This unexpected mobilization by the Israelites took Sisera by surprise. Confident in his dominance over the region, he had likely underestimated the determination of his adversaries. However, he wasted no time in responding, mustering his formidable army with its iron chariots, the pride of Canaanite military power. The sight of these chariots, advanced war machines for their time, must have struck fear into the hearts of the Israelite soldiers. Designed to shatter infantry formations with speed and force, the chariots seemed an insurmountable obstacle. For a people who had endured 2 decades of oppression and relied primarily on foot soldiers, the odds appeared grim. As the Canaanite forces approached, Deborah's voice rang out with clarity and confidence. In Judges 4:14 she declared, "Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" This was not merely a call to arms, but a powerful declaration of faith. Deborah's words reminded Barak and his men that the battle was not theirs alone. God himself was leading the charge. The Israelite soldiers, emboldened by this assurance, descended Mount Tabor with Barak at the helm. The sight of 10,000 determined men marching boldly to face their oppressors must have been awe-inspiring. Meanwhile, the Canaanite forces, confident in their technological superiority, advanced with their chariots. The valley below Mount Tabor, flat and expansive, seemed the ideal terrain for Sisera's war machines. He likely anticipated a swift and decisive victory. However, what transpired on the battlefield was far from what Sisera expected. In Judges 4:14 we read, "At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and army by the sword." This succinct statement attributes the victory entirely to divine intervention. Though the exact details are not described, the text suggests an extraordinary event that threw the Canaanite army into disarray. Many scholars propose that natural forces, orchestrated by God, played a crucial role in this miraculous turn of events. The Kishon River, which the narrative centers around, was typically a modest stream. However, historical and textual clues hint at the possibility of a sudden torrential storm. This storm likely caused the river to overflow, flooding the valley and turning the battlefield into a muddy quagmire. For the Canaanite chariots, this would have been disastrous. The heavy iron vehicles, once a symbol of power, became liabilities as they sank into the mud, immobilized and useless. Horses struggled to pull the trapped chariots, and chaos erupted in the Canaanite ranks. The Israelites, on the other hand, lighter on foot and more familiar with the terrain, gained a significant advantage. Seeing their enemies' prized chariots rendered ineffective must have bolstered their courage. The scene must have been chaotic. Confident Canaanite soldiers suddenly trapped, their forces scattered, and their leader powerless to restore order. The panic and confusion among Sisera's troops marked the beginning of their end. Encouraged by the evident divine intervention, the Israelites attacked with renewed vigor. In Judges 4:16, the narrative continues. Barak pursued the chariots and army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all Sisera's troops fell by the sword. Not a man was left. This relentless pursuit ensured that the victory was absolute. The Canaanite army, once thought invincible, was utterly annihilated. The phrase "not a man was left" underscores the completeness of the defeat. This was not merely a military victory, it was the total destruction of the oppressor's ability to wage war. If a storm indeed occurred, it would have been a dramatic demonstration of God's sovereignty over nature. The Kishon River, now transformed into a raging torrent, likely swept away many of the fleeing soldiers and their chariots. This divine intervention turned the very forces of nature against the Canaanites, showing that their technological advantages were powerless before God's might. The Israelites, emboldened by this turn of events, must have experienced a profound sense of divine presence. The chaos on the battlefield, the sight of immobilized chariots, fleeing soldiers, and a swelling river, was a visible testament to God's hand in their victory. What had seemed an insurmountable challenge was overcome by faith and divine power. The victory at the Kishon River marked a turning point in Israel's history. In Judges 4:23, the account concludes, "On that day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites." This final statement underscores the true source of Israel's triumph, God's intervention. The destruction of Sisera's army not only ended 2 decades of oppression, but also shattered the power of Jabin, the Canaanite king. Israel was no longer under the shadow of fear and submission. This victory inspired a newfound confidence and unity among the tribes. For the Israelites, this day was transformative. It was a reminder of God's faithfulness and a testament to the power of faith and obedience. After years of suffering, they experienced firsthand the truth of Deborah's words, "Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" The battle at the Kishon River was more than a military conflict. It was a defining moment in Israel's spiritual and national identity. Deborah's leadership, rooted in faith and courage, had guided the people through one of their darkest periods. Her unwavering trust in God and her willingness to act on His promises were instrumental in Israel's deliverance. This victory was not just about freedom from oppression, it was a reaffirmation of Israel's covenant relationship with God. The miraculous events of that day, from the storm to the rout of Sisera's army, served as a powerful reminder that their strength came not from chariots or swords, but from their God. For generations to come, the story of Deborah and Barak's triumph would be a testament to the enduring power of faith, courage, and divine intervention. After the devastating collapse of his army, Sisera, the once feared commander of the Canaanite forces, found himself fleeing alone on foot. The man who had confidently led 900 iron chariots into battle was now reduced to a desperate fugitive. His escape was frantic and disoriented, far removed from the battlefield and the chaos left behind. Knowing that capture would mean certain death, Sisera sought refuge wherever he could, a stark contrast to the formidable figure he had been just hours before. As he ran, Sisera must have reflected on the catastrophic reversal of his fortunes. He had expected an easy victory over the Israelites, but now his army was destroyed, his pride shattered, and his survival uncertain. Exhausted and desperate, he stumbled upon the encampment of the Kenites, a nomadic group known for maintaining neutrality between Israel and Canaan. Among them, Sisera believed he would find safety, as there was peace between Jabin, the Canaanite king, and the house of Heber the Kenite. Approaching the camp, Sisera saw a tent belonging to Jael, the wife of Heber. At the time, it was customary for women to have separate tents, and Jael was outside hers when Sisera arrived. Recognizing him immediately, Jael seized the opportunity presented by his vulnerable state. She invited him into her tent, offering him shelter and safety. Grateful for the apparent refuge, Sisera entered Jael's tent, believing he had found a haven. Trusting in the alliance between his king and the Kenites, Sisera let his guard down completely. Exhausted from battle and flight, he asked Jael for water to quench his thirst. Jael, however, went beyond his request, offering him milk instead. This gesture of hospitality likely put him further at ease, convincing him that he was secure. Having quenched his thirst, Sisera instructed Jael to stand guard at the entrance of the tent, telling her to deny his presence if anyone came looking for him. Confident in his safety, he lay down and quickly succumbed to sleep, his exhaustion overwhelming him. It was then that Jael made a bold and fateful decision. Taking a tent peg and a hammer, she approached the sleeping general. With a single, decisive blow, she drove the peg through Sisera's temple, killing him instantly. The once mighty commander of the Canaanite forces, who had terrorized Israel for 2 decades, met his end in the most unexpected way, at the hands of a woman in a nomad's tent. Jael's act was both courageous and risky. By killing Sisera, she aligned herself with the Israelites, risking retaliation from Canaanite forces had her actions been discovered. Yet she chose to act, delivering a critical blow to Israel's oppressors. Her decision demonstrated not only boldness, but also a clear understanding of the moment's significance. With Sisera's death, the Canaanites lost their greatest military leader, and Israel's deliverance was assured. As Sisera's pursuer Barak arrived at the Kenite camp, Jael came out to meet him. She greeted him with words that must have piqued his curiosity and disbelief. "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." Barak followed her into the tent, where he was met with a shocking sight. Sisera, the man who had commanded terror and domination for so long, lay lifeless on the ground, the tent peg still driven into his temple. The scene must have been surreal, a moment of triumph mingled with astonishment. The mighty general who had seemed invincible was defeated, not by Barak or the Israelite army, but by a courageous woman with a hammer and a peg. This moment marked the fulfillment of Deborah's earlier prophecy. When Barak had hesitated to go into battle without her, Deborah had declared in Judges 4:9, "The honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." At the time, Barak likely assumed that Deborah herself would claim this honor. Instead, the prophecy came to pass through Jael, an unexpected heroine whose decisive action sealed the fate of Israel's oppressors. Sisera's death was the final blow to the Canaanites. With their general dead, their army destroyed, and their iron chariots rendered useless, the once dominant power of Jabin's forces crumbled. Israel was free from the oppressive yoke of Canaanite rule. Following these events, Deborah and Barak composed a song of victory, recorded in Judges 5. This ancient poem, one of the oldest pieces of Hebrew literature, offers a profound reflection on the battle and its significance. The song begins with a call to praise the Lord for the deliverance he provided. When the princes in Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise the Lord. The song recounts the dire state of Israel before Deborah's rise. It describes a nation paralyzed by fear, with deserted roads and abandoned villages. Life had come to a standstill under the shadow of oppression until, as the song declares, I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel. This self-identification as a mother highlights Deborah's nurturing yet authoritative role, emphasizing her care for the people and her courage to lead. The song also vividly depicts the chaos of the battle, attributing the victory to divine intervention. The heavens themselves are described as fighting for Israel, with the Kishon River sweeping away the enemy, a poetic retelling of the miraculous events that unfolded on the battlefield. Finally, the song honors Jael's bravery in defeating Sisera, declaring her most blessed of women in tents. Her act is celebrated as the turning point in the battle, a decisive moment that ensured Israel's triumph. The death of Sisera and the subsequent victory over the Canaanites marked the end of an era of suffering for Israel. As Judges 5:31 concludes, "Then the land had peace for 40 years." This period of peace was more than a respite from war. It was a time of spiritual renewal and national restoration. Deborah's leadership, Barak's courage, and Jael's boldness became enduring examples of faith, obedience, and the power of God to work through unexpected people and circumstances. Following the miraculous victory over the Canaanites, Deborah and Barak composed a triumphant song recorded in Judges 5. This ancient hymn, a masterpiece of Hebrew poetry, captures the essence of the battle, recounts the events, and reflects on the divine intervention that secured Israel's deliverance. The song begins by recalling the dire state of Israel before the battle. It highlights how the people had turned to new gods, leading to war at their gates. The text notes that among 40,000 Israelites, not a single shield or spear could be found, underscoring their disarmed and vulnerable condition. This bleak picture serves to magnify the miraculous nature of their victory. It was not achieved through military might, but through God's power and the faith of a few. The song then praises the tribes that answered the call to arms: Ephraim, Benjamin, Manasseh, Zebulun, and Issachar. These tribes are celebrated for their courage and willingness to risk their lives for Israel's deliverance. Zebulun is described as a people who risked their very lives, while Issachar's leaders fought valiantly alongside Barak. Their unity and bravery were critical in turning the tide against the Canaanites. However, the song does not shy away from rebuking those who chose not to participate. Reuben, Gilead, Gad, Dan, and Asher are criticized for staying behind, preoccupied with their own affairs. Reuben's hesitancy is described poetically, as the tribe lingered among the sheep pens, unable to make a decisive commitment. This contrast between the faithful tribes and the indifferent ones underscores the communal nature of Israel's victory. It was a triumph achieved not by the whole nation, but by a willing and courageous remnant. As the song turns to the battle itself, it poetically describes the cosmic forces that aided Israel's victory. In Judges 5:20 we read, "From the heavens the stars fought, from their courses they fought against Sisera." This striking imagery suggests divine intervention, with the heavens themselves joining the fight. Scholars often interpret this as a reference to the natural phenomena that played a pivotal role in the battle, likely a sudden storm that caused the Kishon River to overflow and the battlefield to turn to mud. The song calls the Kishon that ancient river, emphasizing its role as an instrument of God's judgment. The river, normally a calm stream, became a torrent that swept away the enemy, neutralizing their technological advantage of iron chariots. The poetic depiction of these events elevates the narrative beyond a simple recounting of military strategy. It frames the victory as an act of divine will, reinforcing the central theme of the Book of Judges. When Israel is faithful to God, He delivers them from their enemies. One of the song's most celebrated passages is its praise of Jael, the woman who killed Sisera. She is called Most Blessed of Women, a title that honors her bold and decisive act. The song vividly recounts how Jael offered Sisera milk and rest, only to strike him down with a tent peg. The irony of a mighty general meeting his end at the hands of a woman in a tent is emphasized, further glorifying her role in Israel's deliverance. Jael's actions are depicted with dramatic intensity. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head, she shattered and pierced his temple. This graphic description serves to highlight both the finality of Sisera's defeat and the courage it took for Jael to carry out such an act. Her role fulfilled Deborah's earlier prophecy that the honor of victory would go to a woman, solidifying her place as one of the unexpected heroes in Israel's history. The song shifts its focus to Sisera's mother, imagining her looking out of the window, anxiously awaiting her son's return. Her attendants try to console her, suggesting that the delay is due to Sisera dividing the spoils of war. This poignant scene contrasts the Canaanite expectations of triumph with the reality of their crushing defeat. Sisera's mother's longing serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of human pride and the ultimate futility of opposing God's will. The song concludes with a prayer. So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. This final verse encapsulates the song's central message, the inevitable defeat of God's enemies and the exaltation of those who love and follow Him. It frames the victory over Sisera and the Canaanites as part of a broader narrative of divine justice. Beyond recounting the events of the battle, the song serves several important purposes. A poetic recap of the battle. The song preserves the memory of Israel's deliverance, offering details not included in the prose narrative. For instance, it names the tribes that participated and those that abstained, highlighting both unity and division within the nation. A theological interpretation. The song repeatedly emphasizes that the victory was God's doing, not the result of Israel's military strength. This theological lens reinforces the lesson that faith and obedience to God are the true sources of strength. A celebration of victory. By inviting the people to rejoice and praise God, the song transforms the military victory into a communal act of worship. This celebration would have helped solidify the event in the national consciousness, a legacy for future generations. Likely sung or recited for years to come, the song served as a reminder of God's faithfulness and power, inspiring future generations to trust in Him during times of hardship. A testament to early Hebrew poetry. The song's vivid imagery, use of parallelism, and sophisticated structure make it a literary masterpiece. Its alternating narrative, praise, and dramatic imagination reflect a rich tradition of poetic composition in early Israelite culture. The events celebrated in the Song of Deborah and Barak ushered in a period of peace and stability for Israel. The text notes, "Then the land had peace for 40 years. This peace was not merely the absence of war, it was a time of renewal and restoration for a nation that had been battered by oppression. Deborah's leadership continued to guide Israel during this period. Her wisdom and discernment, which had been instrumental in securing victory, now helped maintain unity and resolve internal disputes. Deborah's influence reached far beyond her lifetime, becoming a beacon for future generations in Israel. Her story, immortalized in the poetic Song of Deborah, continued to be recited and studied, serving as a reminder of her remarkable victory and the divine deliverance she helped bring about. This legacy ensured that Deborah's name was etched in the collective memory of her people, not only as a judge and prophetess, but as an exemplar of faithful leadership during one of Israel's most turbulent periods. Her success as a leader set a powerful precedent for Israel. Deborah demonstrated that leadership does not stem from physical might or military dominance, but from wisdom, faith, and the ability to inspire and unify a people. This model of leadership, rooted in trust in God and a deep sense of justice, would influence future leaders of Israel, from kings like David to prophets like Samuel. Deborah's example showed that the greatest leaders are those who rely not on their own strength, but on the Lord's guidance and power. The period of peace that followed Deborah's victory over the Canaanites was a transformative time for Israel. Freed from the constant threat of invasion, the nation experienced stability and security. This allowed the Israelites to focus on rebuilding their communities, cultivating their lands, and developing trade. The prosperity that flourished during these years was a direct result of God's blessing on a nation that had turned back to Him under Deborah's leadership. This peaceful era was a testament to the covenant relationship between God and Israel. When the people followed Him faithfully, they were protected and blessed. However, as the book of Judges repeatedly illustrates, this peace was fragile. Over time, a new generation would arise, one that did not know the Lord or remember His mighty works. Inevitably, the cycle of apostasy, oppression, and deliverance would begin again. Yet, even in the midst of this recurring pattern, Deborah's legacy endured as a shining example of what faithful leadership could achieve. Deborah's story remained a source of inspiration long after her time. Her song continued to be sung, and her example of courage and faith became a touchstone for future generations. In a society where leadership roles were overwhelmingly male-dominated, Deborah stood as a testament to God's ability to use anyone, regardless of gender or societal norms, to accomplish His purposes. Her life and leadership became a symbol of hope and resilience for all who faced adversity. Deborah's story is more than a historical account. It is a powerful lesson in faith and action. It teaches us that God often chooses unexpected individuals to carry out His plans. Deborah was not a warrior or a king, but she was willing to rise to the occasion, guided by her faith and trust in God. Her story reminds us that true strength comes not from weapons or political power, but from obedience to God and the courage to act when called. Deborah's legacy offers profound lessons for anyone seeking to lead or navigate life's challenges. Faith over fear. Deborah's faith in God's promises allowed her to lead with confidence, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Her trust in God's sovereignty enabled her to inspire and mobilize a disheartened nation. Leadership rooted in wisdom and justice. Deborah's decisions were guided by her deep connection with God and her commitment to justice. Her wisdom and discernment earned her the respect and trust of her people, proving that effective leadership is built on integrity. Courage to act. Deborah's willingness to act in a time of crisis changed the course of Israel's history. She reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to move forward despite it, trusting in God's guidance. A legacy of faithfulness. Through her actions, Deborah left a lasting impact on her nation. Her story encourages us to think beyond our immediate circumstances and consider how our faith and decisions can influence future generations. Deborah's life challenges us to rise above limitations and fears, trusting that God equips those He calls. Her story encourages us to lead with justice and wisdom, to act with courage in the face of adversity, and to have faith that God is at work, even in the most difficult circumstances. She reminds us that leadership is not about titles or positions, but about answering the call to serve with humility and faith. As we reflect on Deborah's life, may we be inspired to stand firm in our faith, lead with integrity, and trust that God can use each of us to accomplish extraordinary things. Like Deborah, may we rise to the challenges before us, confident that with God, victory is always possible. Thank you for exploring the inspiring story of Deborah with us. If you've enjoyed this journey into the life of one of Israel's most remarkable leaders, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on our upcoming videos. We'll continue to dive into the lives of biblical characters, uncovering the lessons they offer for our own lives. Remember, just as God worked in the life of Deborah, Jacob, and countless others, He desires to work in your life too. Their stories remind us of His faithfulness, His power, and His unwavering presence, even in the most challenging circumstances. Thank you for joining us. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next video.